All right, so this is problem one, and it was year 2008, Form B, question 4. And a researcher wants to conduct a study to test whether listening to soothing music for 20 minutes helps to reduce diastolic blood pressure in patients with high blood pressure, compared to simply letting them sit quietly in a noise-free environment for 20 minutes. 100 patients with high blood pressure at a large medical clinic are available to participate in the study. Proposed a design for the study to compare these two treatments. Now, I just want to address a couple things initially. First off, they had a preferred method. They preferred that you used a paired design or a match paired. However, that was not required. You could receive full credit for doing a completely randomized design. And I'll be honest with you, I know that while they preferred the other, their first choice that they show as the first person the first example they show of students and the one who received a full credit for this did a randomized design. And I'll be honest, a match pair doesn't appear obvious to me with this. Because remember, to run a match pair design, there has to be something that actually matches them, or there has to be before and after. And in this particular instance, it'd be very easy to assume that, hey, the treatment worked, so we're not going to give them a second treatment. So consequently, I'm showing the completely randomized design, which was their least favorite response, but it would still give you full credit. Whenever you do a completely randomized design, you either need to number the people or you need to put their names in a big hat and mix them. And the mixing is really important, so make sure you include that. And the first 50 names you draw receive one of the treatments. And it is extraordinarily important that you say how you are assigning treatments, all right, and which treatment they're being assigned to. The remaining 50 that weren't drawn were in the noise-free environment. And prior to administering the treatment, the diastolic blood pressure will be measured for each volunteer. Why? We need to make sure that there's a drop, so we're going to need to measure it before. And then after the 20-minute treatment has passed, the patients will again measure the diastolic pressure and compare the differences pre-treatment versus post-treatment to see which treatment option had the greatest. It is really important that you address randomization, well, the assignment of how you're actually going to how you're going to do the randomization. You need then to make sure that you address which treatment they received, and then you need to make sure that you say that you're going to compare results at the end and what you actually are going to compare. Those things are critical that you address. The next part. The null hypothesis for this study is that there is no difference, and you did not need to write it down, but I wrote it down for ours, that there, so no difference just means that they're equal. Oops, not minus, equal. For the two treatments, and the alternative hypothesis is the mean reduction in diastolic blood pressure is greater for the music treatment. So I went ahead and defined what they were, mainly for my benefit, not required, because they defined it for you in this particular problem. If this had been a hypothesis test or confidence interval, that would have been required, but not here. And describe type 1 and type 2 errors and the consequences of each in the context of the study. And discuss which one you think is more which is more serious. Well, mu1 in my case was listening to the music, and mu2 was sitting in a quiet room. And we wanted to know if music 1 had a greater diastolic blood pressure drop than just sitting in a quiet room. So that's what that means. Well, a type 1 error is always rejecting. I highly recommend that you give a simplified definition, which is what I did, because it lets the reader know or the grader know what it is you're thinking, and lets them know that you know something. And so a type 1 is mistakenly rejecting the null when it's in fact true. So I rejected this, but that was an error. It was actually true. In this case, we would mistakenly believe that listening to music would have a greater impact on lowering diastolic blood pressure than sitting in a room when in fact it did not. So I rejected this. This is what I believed. Notice I put it in context. Hypercritical that you always put it in context. The consequence. And even if they don't ask for the consequence, you always need to give it. As a result, the clinic would be providing and paying for a music therapy that wasn't any more effective than sitting in a quiet room. And further, they're subjecting patients to a treatment that doesn't work. And on the other hand, a type 2 error is failing to reject. And I know this is kind of corny, but just remember, failing to, type 2. So failing to reject the null when it is false. So in other words, I didn't reject this. I believed this, but it was false. It was an error. I should have believed that the music helped. So in this case, we mistakenly believed that there was no difference in treatments when in fact the music therapy lowered blood pressure more than sitting in a quiet room. As a result, the clinic would not provide music therapy and the patients would miss out on a free service that actually lowered blood pressure. Now, as to which is worse, that's actually up to you. And I only addressed one of them. You could have chosen either one. There's an argument to be made for either one. So you could have said type 1 or type 2. You just needed to defend your argument with something logical. And my argument was I believe that a type 1 error is more serious because the clinic is paying for an ineffective treatment and is telling the patients that it works when it doesn't. So consequently, they're wasting money and they're wasting the patient's time. That would be my argument. On the other side, you could say a type 2 error was more a bigger problem because we're missing out on an effective treatment and probably going to go to a more invasive or drug treatment when we could have just played music and lowered their blood pressure. Okay, I believe that's all on that problem. So stop the